Hello there, welcome to Whiskey Lore. I am Drew Hanish and time for another whiskey tasting. And today we're going to be doing a tasting of a whiskey that on my channel has had a wee bit of controversy. And the controversy comes from the name. And the name is Ledaig. All right? Ledaig. All right, here's the thing with this name. While I was in Ireland, of all places, I was going into a distillery that was being commissioned that week that I was there. They had only run the stills for 3 days, or they'd had 3 runs that they'd run on the stills by the time I got in there. And I got a chance to walk down and talk to the head distiller, Ian McMillan. And we struck up a conversation. We were talking about his distilling practices. You know, here's a guy coming from Scotland, and now he's working with 3 stills. He's working on a very interesting system where they're going to do double distillation, triple distillation, and 2.5 time distillation, which I find very interesting. And then as we were talking, he said something about Bunnahabhain and that he had worked for Bunnahabhain. And I brought up the fact that, you know, it was interesting that Bunnahabhain had moved to doing a peated whiskey just once a year because people were like, oh, you're on Islay, you should do a peated whiskey. And then as we talked a little more, he brought up Tobermory, which is part of that same group of distilleries. And he said Tobermory, and I went, so you can answer this question for me. How do you pronounce Ledaig? And he said, first of all, he said you're there. So the way I said it did not offend him. Okay, and this is the guy that gave the whiskey its name. So I feel if I say Ledaig and I'm somewhere in that territory, I'm good. Although, if you read the side of the box, it says that it is Ledaig, which is another way that I've heard it pronounced. And in fact, in my video that I did on the pronunciation, I threw that version out there as well as an option that some people say it that way and that I wasn't 100% sure. But I talked to the man, and he said Ledaig. He said it. He didn't say egg on the end. It was more ick. So it's tricky, and my mouth is not 100% committed to ending it that way properly because it's not a natural thing for an American to go from Ledaig, you know? So anyway, it's something I'm going to work on. But if I say Ledaig, I think most people will understand what the heck I'm talking about. Actually, I take that back. Most people will have no idea what I'm talking about because not a lot of people know about this particular whiskey. And that's part of the reason why I want to review it today, because it is a whiskey that this will be my 3rd bottle of it. It is one of those whiskeys that is a staple in my cabinet, and I think it deserves a place in your cabinet as well because it's gone up in price a little bit. I think the first time I bought this, it was around $55. Then it was $60. Now it's $66. So I'm thinking that partially because Ralphie made it his whiskey of the year one year recently, that's probably emboldened the distillery to jack the price up a little bit. Or maybe it's inflation, or maybe it's a leftover hangover from the tariffs. I don't know. But whatever it is, still, for a 46.3% ABV whiskey that is a really nice quality whiskey, I think it is worth it. So, there you go. Anyway, hopefully more people will know what Ledaig is, and it will become something that people will have to find my video to see how to pronounce it, because I'm not that far off from the proper way of saying it. It's degrees. So, what I really like about this whiskey is that it comes up with some notes that kind of twist themselves, you would normally say that, if there's a orchard fruit, it's going to be a bright orchard fruit. That if it's apple or it's pear, that it's going to be a bright note. What's interesting is with this whiskey, the smoke mingles with that orchard fruit and actually changes the nature of that orchard fruit to where it's almost a darker it's almost like a dark fruit apple. And I know that sounds weird. We think of dark fruits, we think of raisins, plums, figs, that sort of thing. But it brings that kind of a character. And of course, whiskey is not made by grinding apples up and pears and putting them into your whiskey. This is alcohol and congeners and all of these things working together to create these different kinds of flavor notes. And so they don't have to be natural in the world. We in our brains try to fit them to something. And so with this one, it's just really interesting because that smoky note brings that orchard fruit into a darker place. Add on to it that there is also a iodine medicinal character to this, and a bit of a briny note that comes in as well as hint of rubber tire, which sounds weird, but if you've ever smelled a rubber tire on a hot summer's day, there's a little note of that in this whiskey on the nose as well. So there's a whole lot of interesting things going on the nose, a little matchstick in there as well. And that's what just fascinates me about this whiskey. This is the first whiskey that I ever had. I was sitting at the Scotch Whisky Experience in Edinburgh, and I'd not had this, and I wanted to try it. So he brought me over a glass of it, and I nosed this for 30 minutes. And the guy that I was talking to sitting next to me was like, "Are you ever going to drink that?" And I'm like, I'm in love with this nose. And I'm afraid to drink it because if I drink it, it's going to spoil the nose, which it didn't. But this is a huge nosing whiskey for me. I think the nose on this one is one of my favorites. And like I say, it's just because it is fascinating. Cheers. So it's interesting because the bourbon character, this is only aged in ex-bourbon. The bourbon character takes over next. You get the vanilla, the toffee, spice, fruit, and the thing you don't really get initially is smoke. All that briny character, all that medicinal, none of it. It's like you are all of a sudden transformed over into this bourbon world with a little bit of that fruit coming in. And then it comes back to pepper, spice, smoke, and Doritos. I don't know why I equate it to Doritos. I think it's the saltiness in there that does that. But there's like a hint of almost like a corn kind of note. Another Cornish hen. And then the nose gets better. It's a really interesting whiskey. Again, I'm going to give you a negative. What's going to sound like a negative. There's a little orchard fruit that comes in on the end, and it's a little brighter. It's going to sound like a negative. But Fritos. Fritos, when my socks have got a little rank, that foot odor is kind of kicking up a little bit. That smell reminds me of Fritos, and I get a note of that in there. So I don't want to say it smells like foot odor at the end, or that the finish has a foot odor note. But that's interesting, rubber tire and foot odor. But they're all pleasant. Everything is pleasant within this whole range. It's just a absolutely fascinating whiskey. Do I think it's the best whiskey on the market? No. Do I think the nose is one of the best noses? For me, I really enjoy it. The whiskey as a whole, I think it's a very good whiskey. I don't think it's blowing the doors off of anything, but I'm telling you right now that this is a whiskey that I will always have around because it demonstrates to me that because when I first tasted this, all I tasted was smoke, really, and I got that smoke on the nose, and I appreciated it and I loved it, but I didn't really know why I loved it. And the more I have now on the third bottle of it, I am fully starting to realize what it is that I like about this whiskey. First nosing on it, you might think it's one-dimensional, but it is far from it. As you keep nosing it, it just keeps picking up more and more scents. So it's definitely one that I like. If you're not into smoky whiskeys, in fact, I'm going to do a training video very, very soon on smoky whiskey to maybe get some people interested in smoky whiskey that normally wouldn't be interested in smoky whiskey. But, like I say, for me, this is a really good one. So if you enjoy the video, give me a like. I would really appreciate that because that helps other people find the videos. And then subscribe if you aren't already, and you'll get a chance to see more videos along the way. We're on the march towards 1,000. Got a ways to go still, but trying to get to 1,000 subscribers there. Mainly just great to have you guys on board, and if you have any comments, leave them below. Until next time, cheers and slainte. Good luck working on your pronunciations. Mm-hmm. A little grain note in there too. Yeah. Nice.